The river did not announce danger with noise. It moved quietly, dark and swollen, sliding between its banks with the patience of something that had taken lives before and would take more again. Morning fog clung low to the water, blurring the line between current and shore, between solid ground and the cold pool beneath. Ranger Evan Hale stood at the edge, boots sinking into mud softened by thaw, his breath fogging the air as he studied the movement for signs most people never learn to see. The call had come through as routine. Possible animal in distress. No mention of urgency. No one said drowning. Evan preferred calls like that. Straightforward problems. Problems that did not talk back or ask questions. He scanned the far bend of the river, following the drag of branches and half-frozen reeds, until a sudden flash of movement broke the surface calm. Black. Shining. Gone again. He stepped closer. The sound reached him then, not a scream, not quite, a frantic churn of water, the heavy slap of something fighting the current. A horse's head broke the surface, mane slicked flat, eyes wide and white with panic. Its body was trapped lower, caught in debris beneath the surface, legs kicking against something that refused to let go. Evan swore under his breath and keyed his radio. Dispatch crackled back, distant and tinny through the fog. Backup was at least 40 minutes out. The river did not have 40 minutes to spare. He watched the horse slip under again, nostrils vanishing beneath the dark, and felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the one he never talked about, the one that came whenever time narrowed and choices thinned. Protocol said wait. Protocol was written by people who stood on dry ground. He shrugged out of his pack and dropped it on the bank. The water numbed his legs instantly when he stepped in, cold biting through fabric, stealing breath before he could brace. The current pushed hard, testing him, daring him to lose his footing. He moved sideways, slow and deliberate, planting each step before shifting his weight. The horse surfaced again, closer now, eyes locking onto him with raw, animal desperation. "It's all right," Evan said, voice low, steady, though nothing about the situation was. He reached for the rope coiled at his shoulder, fingers stiff, and edged closer as the horse thrashed, striking water into his face. For a moment, it felt like standing before a storm that could decide to break him apart. The horse went under again. Evan lunged, arm plunging into the icy dark, fingers brushing wet mane before the current dragged it out of reach. His boots slipped. Water surged against his chest. For a split second, the river claimed him too, pulling hard, reminding him how small one body could be. He planted his knee against a submerged rock and held. Muscles screamed. Breath burned. He forced his hand deeper, finding the rope of muscle at the horse's neck, feeling the violent shudder of life fighting to stay above water. The horse surfaced with a violent gasp, head jerking toward him, and Evan wrapped the rope around its chest in a move born of instinct rather than thought. "Easy," he murmured, though his heart was hammering. He leaned back, anchoring the rope against his shoulder, and pulled with everything he had. The river resisted. Mud sucked at his boots. The rope burned his palms. The horse kicked, panic flaring, and Evan was nearly dragged forward, water swallowing his balance. He dug in, teeth clenched, forcing himself to breathe, to pull in rhythm with the animal's surging attempts to break free. Slowly, impossibly, something shifted. The tension changed. Debris loosened its grip. With a final wrenching pull, Evan stumbled backward onto the bank, hauling the horse with him. They collapsed together in the mud, water streaming from black hide and ranger's coat alike. The horse lay still. Evan knelt beside it, chest heaving, waiting for movement that did not come. The fog thickened around them, the river flowing on as if nothing had happened at all. Evan pressed his hand to the horse's neck, listening, praying, afraid of what the silence might mean. The horse's chest did not rise. Evan pressed his ear closer, blocking out the river, the wind, everything except the hope of sound. Then, faint but unmistakable, a breath shuddered through the black body beneath his hand. Steam lifted from wet hide. Evan laughed once, sharp and broken, and rubbed warmth back into stiff muscle while the horse dragged air into burning lungs. Minutes passed measured by nothing but breath and trembling. The horse's legs twitched. Its head shifted an inch, then fell heavy again. Evan stripped off his jacket and draped it across the animal's neck, shielding what heat he could. He checked for blood, for broken bone, finding only scraped skin and the angry swelling of old injuries reopened by the river's grip. When Evan finally stood, the horse's eye followed him. Not wild, not glassy. A dark, steady focus fixed on his movement. He took 2 steps toward his pack. Hooves scraped behind him. Evan turned. The horse struggled upright, legs shaking, body swaying as if the world had not yet decided to hold still. It should have bolted. Every instinct Evan knew said it would. Instead, the horse took 1 careful step toward him, then another, stopping close enough that Evan could feel heat radiating through the cold air. "That's close enough," Evan said quietly, though he did not move away. The horse lowered its head. Water dripped from its mane onto the mud between them. Evan stayed where he was, hands loose at his sides, heart pounding harder now than it had in the river. He had rescued animals before. None had chosen to stay. He crouched slowly, keeping his eyes soft, his movements small. The horse did not flinch. It watched him with an intensity that felt unsettlingly aware. Evan reached out, then stopped himself, letting the moment decide its own shape. The horse closed the distance instead, brushing its wet forehead against his chest. The contact was brief, almost accidental, but it carried weight. Evan froze, breath locked behind his ribs. He felt the tremor beneath the animal's skin, the fragile trust of a creature still balanced on fear. When the horse stepped back, it did not retreat far. It stood, waiting. Evan retrieved his pack and moved toward the treeline. The horse followed. Not driven. Not chased. It matched his pace with cautious loyalty, stopping when he stopped, starting when he did. Evan tested it, changing direction, slowing, quickening. The horse adjusted without panic, as though the choice had already been made. They reached the old ranger shelter by mid-morning. Evan led without touching, guiding by presence alone. Inside, he built a fire, boiled water, cleaned wounds. The horse stood quietly, muscles relaxing inch by inch as warmth crept back into its bones. Outside, the river continued its silent passage, carrying debris and secrets downstream. Inside the shelter, Evan watched the horse breathe, steady now, alive. When he stepped away to fetch more wood, hooves shifted softly behind him. The horse was still there. Not trapped. Not claimed. Just staying. It unsettled him more than fear ever had. Evan sat on the bench, watching the rise and fall of the horse's flank, listening to the crack of firewood and the distant rush of water. He told himself it was coincidence, exhaustion, shock. Animals sought warmth. Nothing more. Yet the horse shifted closer whenever he moved, aligning itself with him as if the shelter were too large to occupy alone. Evan remembered another night, years earlier, when staying had felt impossible. He pushed the memory away and focused on the present, on tending a life that had not asked for saving yet accepted it anyway. Outside, clouds thickened, promising colder weather. Inside, the horse lifted its head and met his gaze, unblinking. Evan stood to open the door, offering the animal an exit. Freedom lay a dozen steps away. The horse did not take it. Instead, it remained, hooves planted, eyes calm, waiting for him to choose what came next. The decision hung between them, heavier than the river's pull, and Evan realized rescue had only been the beginning, not the end, of what this meeting demanded from him in this quiet moment. Night settled without ceremony. The fire burned low, its light brushing the shelter walls in dull orange strokes, and Evan stayed awake longer than he needed to. The horse rested on its feet, weight shifted but steady, head lowered, breath slow. Each small sound, the crack of cooling wood, the sigh of wind at the door, felt amplified by the shared quiet. Evan moved carefully, aware that any sudden change could undo the fragile balance between them. When he poured warm water over a cloth and wiped river grit from the horse's shoulder, it did not pull away. The scar beneath the mud was old, pale against black hide, shaped like a careless rope burn. Evan's jaw tightened. He knew the look of injuries left by hands that had not waited for trust. Sleep came in fragments. Evan woke to the horse's body blocking the door, standing square, ears angled outward. Not alarmed. Alert. As if it had decided on a task. Evan sat up, listening. The night offered nothing but wind and distance, yet the horse did not move until he rose beside it. They stood together, silhouettes cut from firelight, two figures learning the shape of the same space. When Evan reached for his coat, the horse shifted aside, allowing him passage, then followed as he stepped outside. Dawn arrived thin and gray. Frost traced the ground, and the river wore a skin of mist like unfinished armor. Evan walked the perimeter, checking nothing in particular, feeling watched in a way that did not unsettle him. The horse mirrored his steps, pausing when he paused, lifting its head when he did. Evan tried leaving it behind. He took 10 steps toward the trees. Hooves followed. He stopped. The horse stopped. He turned, meeting the animal's gaze, and something passed between them that was neither command nor plea. It was recognition, sharp and unexpected, like seeing an old habit reflected back. He returned to the shelter and set about small tasks, mending a loose hinge, stacking wood, boiling water again. The horse remained close without crowding, learning the rhythms of his movement as Evan learned the quiet language of its stillness. When he brushed mud from its legs, the horse flinched once, then steadied, breath deepening as Evan slowed his hands. Trust, he thought, was never granted all at once. It accumulated in moments too small to measure until suddenly it was there. By midday, clouds thickened, pressing the valley into a muted hush. Evan studied the horse's wounds, noting stiffness in the left hind leg. It favored it without complaint. He wondered how long it had survived alone, how many rivers it had crossed without help. The question carried weight because it echoed another he had stopped asking himself years ago. He pushed it aside and focused on what was in front of him. Food. Warmth. Time. The horse startled once, sudden and sharp, at the snap of a branch in the distance. Evan felt the instinct to step back, to give space, but he stayed. He spoke softly, meaningless words shaped only to carry calm. The horse's tension eased, though it did not look away from the trees. Evan realized then that staying was not a single decision but a series of them, made again and again in the face of old fear. As evening approached, Evan opened the shelter door wide. The land beyond lay open, unclaimed. The horse stood at the threshold, ears flicking, body angled toward freedom. Evan waited, hands empty. After a long moment, the horse turned back inside, choosing shelter over distance. Evan closed the door against the cold, understanding that whatever this was, it would ask more of him than one rescue, and he was no longer certain he wanted to refuse. Morning broke clear and brittle, the cold sharper than before, as if the land itself were testing what had been decided during the night. Evan stepped outside the shelter and found the valley changed by light. Frost glittered along the grass. The river moved slower now, surface dark and steady, its earlier violence hidden beneath calm. He stood listening, breathing in air that burned his lungs, aware of the weight settling in his chest. This was the hour when choices usually revealed themselves, when what stayed unspoken could no longer be avoided. The sound of engines reached him before the sight. Tires crunched on frozen gravel. A transport truck eased into view near the riverbank, followed by another ranger truck. Evan felt the shift immediately, tension pulling tight along his shoulders. He knew why they had come. Injured wild animals were liabilities. Horses especially. Too strong, too unpredictable. The black horse moved to his side without prompting, body aligned with his, ears angled forward, attentive but calm. Two men stepped out, boots heavy, voices clipped. They assessed the horse with professional distance, noting scars, stiffness, the size of its frame. Words like relocation and sedation passed between them, efficient and impersonal. Evan listened without interrupting, though his gaze never left the horse. When they moved closer with equipment, the horse stiffened, weight shifting back, breath quickening. Evan lifted a hand, a small gesture, asking for pause. "Give me a minute," he said. They hesitated, exchanging a glance. Time was measured in protocol, not instinct, but they stepped back. Evan moved toward the horse slowly, openly, letting it see his hands, his empty palms. The horse's muscles trembled, memory rising beneath the surface calm. Evan felt it too, the echo of being cornered by decisions made elsewhere. He stood close enough to feel warmth, not touching yet, breathing steady. "It's all right," he said again, words stripped of anything but intent. The horse's head lowered inch by inch. The tension eased, not gone but managed. Evan placed his hand against its neck, feeling the solid certainty of muscle beneath skin. A collective breath released around them. The men watched, surprised despite themselves. There was no display, no sudden transformation. Only a quiet agreement unfolding in plain sight. After a long moment, the lead ranger nodded. The equipment stayed where it was. The horse was granted time. Observation instead of transport. Space instead of force. Evan felt the decision settle like a weightlifting, leaving behind something unfamiliar and light. Days followed with deliberate slowness. The horse healed as the river receded, strength returning without spectacle. Evan resumed his patrols, though he found himself circling back often, checking tracks, listening for hoofbeats. The horse ranged freely near the water, never fenced, never tethered. It approached when it wished, left when it wished. Trust held because it was not tested. On the 7th morning, Evan stood by the river where it had all begun. The horse claimed the opposite bank, head lifted, mane catching the early light. For a moment, they simply regarded one another across the water that had nearly taken them both. Then the horse turned, moving upstream, steps sure, unhurried. Evan watched until the black shape blended with shadow and trees. He felt no loss, only a steadiness he had forgotten was possible. The river flowed on, indifferent and eternal, but something within him had shifted course. He turned back toward his truck, toward the work waiting beyond the bend, carrying with him the quiet knowledge that rescue did not always mean holding on. Sometimes it meant learning how to let go without closing yourself off again, and that was a lesson worth staying open for. If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from. These stories matter.